Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen, and enjoy my stories every day. The day started like any other in the bustling life of James Monroe. He prepared for another day at his tech consultancy firm, a role that often kept him occupied and away from home. His wife, Lila, had recently taken up a new hobby, collecting vintage trinkets online, which James attributed to her creative outlets during his long hours away. She was always good at keeping herself occupied. That morning, a sharp ring from the doorbell broke through the hum of his morning routine. James, puzzled, walked over to the door. Standing outside was a courier with a bright smile, clutching a small, elegantly wrapped package. "For Mrs. Monroe," the courier said, handing over the package and a clipboard for James to sign. "Thank you," James mumbled, curious about the sender as no special occasion was coming up that he could recall. He watched the courier jog back to his van and drive off before shutting the door. With the package in hand, James noticed a small note attached to the ribbon, from the baby. His brow furrowed in confusion. They didn't have children, nor were they planning any. Maybe it was some sort of joke or a marketing gimmick, he thought. Intrigued and slightly amused, James tore open the package in the kitchen. The contents were shocking. Inside lay an assortment of adult toys, not the kind of trinkets Lila usually admired. His amusement vanished, replaced by a sinking feeling in his stomach. This wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. The room felt suddenly colder as he turned the note over. There was a handwritten message on the back. "Thought you'd enjoy these. Can't wait for our next session. Jay." Who was Jay? And sessions? His mind raced with the implications. James's heart pounded in his ears as he pieced together the signs he had been dismissing for months: late nights, cryptic phone calls, unexplained expenses. He had been blind, but not anymore. Determined to confront Lila but needing evidence, James decided to set a trap. He placed the contents back as they were, resealed the package, and left it on the kitchen table where Lila would see it the moment she walked in. He then positioned one of their home cameras to face the table, ensuring it would capture her reaction. The day dragged on as James pretended to head to work, his mind a whirlwind of betrayal and anger. Instead, he parked his car around the corner and waited, watching the live feed from the camera on his phone. Hours later, Lila entered the kitchen. Her reaction was telling. Her face lit up with surprise, then morphed into confusion, and finally settled into a panic as she hastily typed out a message on her phone. James had seen enough. He stormed into the house, his fury barely contained. "Lila! What is this?" he demanded, gesturing towards the package. Lila jumped, her face draining of color. "James! You scared me. I don't know what that is. It just arrived, I guess. Don't lie to me." James's voice was a harsh whisper. "Who's Jay? What sessions?" The ensuing conversation was a blur of lies and half-truths. Lila tried to explain, to deny, but the evidence was overwhelming. Betrayed and broken, James made a decision fueled by a hurt that ran deep and dark. That night, James began plotting his revenge. He would make sure Lila regretted her betrayal deeply. This was just the beginning. The first chapter of his retribution had just begun. James stands in the shadowed hallway, his mind churning with dark thoughts as he listens to Lila plead from the living room. She's on the phone, her voice laced with desperation. "Please, you have to help me." He knows. He tightens his grip on the phone, replaying her betrayal over and over. The initial shock has given way to a calculated fury. James is no longer just a betrayed husband, he's a man on a mission. He needs more evidence, something irrefutable. "I understand, Lila, but you need to calm down," a hushed male voice responds from the speakerphone. James doesn't recognize the voice, but he assumes it's Jay, the mysterious figure from the note. Lila's voice cracks. "I can't calm down. What if he does something? What if he leaves me?" James steps forward, the floorboard creaking under his weight. Lila flinches, ending the call abruptly. She turns to face him, her eyes wide with fear. "What were you going to do, Lila? Who was that?" James's voice is calm, eerily so. "It's not what you think, James. Please, let's just talk about this," she pleads, stepping towards him. But James steps back, holding up a hand. "Save it. I heard enough." "Who is he?" The silence that follows is thick, charged with tension. Lila bites her lip, her resolve crumbling. It's just someone from work. We were just talking." "Talking? Is that what you call it?" James scoffs, his mind racing. He pulls out his phone, showing her the note. "Explain this then." Lila's face collapses into despair. "It was a mistake, James. A terrible mistake. A mistake that kept happening, right?" James's voice rises, his anger barely contained. He steps closer, his presence dominating. "You brought him into our home, Lila. Into our bed." She shakes her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, it wasn't like that. I swear it never got that far." But James is beyond listening. He turns away, his thoughts clear. He needs to confront this man, see the truth for himself. "Stay here. We're not done." James grabs his keys and heads to the door. His car roars to life, a reflection of his inner turmoil. He drives to the address he'd forced out of Lila earlier, a small apartment in a nondescript building across town. The drive fuels his anger, every turn a tightening of the knot in his chest. He arrives, storming up to the apartment. He doesn't bother knocking, instead using the spare key Lila had unknowingly revealed during their confrontation. The door swings open to reveal a dimly lit room. Sitting there, surprised by the intrusion, is a man in his 30s, casual, unassuming. He stands up, confusion etched across his face. "Can I help you? Are you Jay?" James's voice is a low growl. The man stiffens, his eyes narrowing. "Who's asking?" "I'm James Monroe. Lila's husband." The color drains from the man's face. He holds up his hands. "Look, I didn't know she was married. She told me she was separated." Lies. All lies. James steps forward, his anger palpable. "You destroyed my marriage. It wasn't like that. I swear. We just talked mostly. It never went." "Save it." James cuts him off. He snaps photos of the man and his apartment, evidence of this betrayal. "I want you to tell her it's over. And if you contact her again, the next person you'll talk to will be my lawyer." The man nods, fear in his eyes. Okay. I understand." James leaves as abruptly as he arrived, the night air cooling his heated skin but not his burning heart. The drive home is quieter, but the storm inside him rages on. He knows what he needs to do next. The betrayal is clear, the evidence mounting. Lila's deception won't go unpunished. His plan is only just beginning. The next steps will be calculated and cold, just like the betrayal that ignited them. James sits alone in the dimly lit study, his fingers drumming on the polished mahogany desk. The room is quiet, save for the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. He pores over the photographs he took at Jay's apartment, each one a stark reminder of Lila's deceit. His mind is a whirlwind of schemes, each more vengeful than the last. As he plots, his phone vibrates, slicing through the silence. It's a text from Lila. "Can we talk? Please. I'm sorry." James stares at the message, his jaw tightening. He doesn't reply. Instead, he starts drafting an email to his lawyer, detailing the need for swift and severe legal actions. Divorce is the only answer now, but it must be on his terms. As he types, another plan forms, a way to expose Lila's betrayal publicly. His thoughts are interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. Reluctantly, he stands and opens it to find Lila standing there, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "James, please, we need to talk," she pleads, stepping forward. He blocks the doorway, his stance firm. "Talk. After everything, you think we can just talk it out?" "I just want to explain," Lila whispers, her voice breaking. James scoffs, stepping back to let her in, his demeanor icy. "This should be good." They move to the living room, where Lila takes a seat, wringing her hands nervously. James remains standing, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "I made a mistake," Lila begins, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was stupid, a moment of weakness. I never meant to hurt you." "A moment of weakness?" James repeats, his tone mocking. "Is that what you call it? How long was this moment?" "It wasn't just about that. It was emotional. We were just friends at first," Lila tries to explain, her eyes pleading for understanding. "Friends don't send adult toys as gifts, Lila," James snaps. "You made a fool out of me." Lila lowers her head, tears dripping onto her lap. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I've ended it, I promise. It was a huge mistake." James paces back and forth, his mind racing. Sorry doesn't even start to cover it. "I trusted you, and you betrayed me in the worst way." "I know, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," Lila says, looking up at him with desperate eyes. James stops pacing and leans close, his voice cold. "You can't undo this. I want a divorce, Lila. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are." Lila gasps, her face pale with shock. "You wouldn't. Please, think about how this will affect both of our lives." "That didn't seem to concern you when you decided to betray me," James retorts sharply. He turns away, unable to look at her any longer. "I'll be speaking to my lawyer tomorrow. I suggest you find one too." Defeated, Lila stands and heads towards the door, stopping to look back at James, who avoids her gaze. "I really am sorry, James. I hope one day you can forgive me." James doesn't respond, his silence a heavy shroud between them as she leaves. Once the door clicks shut, he sinks into the couch, the weight of his plans and their repercussions pressing down on him. His revenge is set in motion, and there's no turning back now. The next steps are clear, but the satisfaction he expected feels hollow. As the clock ticks on, James realizes that this is just the beginning of a long, arduous battle, not just against Lila, but against the bitterness threatening to consume him. The morning sun casts long shadows in James's office as he sits behind his desk, surrounded by legal documents and digital recordings. The room is a fortress of solitude, filled with the echo of his resolute breaths. He has spent the past few weeks orchestrating the downfall of his wife, Lila, gathering evidence and securing allies in his quest for retribution. Today, he is ready to strike the final blow. James's phone buzzes with an incoming call. It's his private investigator, confirming the last piece of the puzzle. He listens intently, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Perfect. Make sure that gets leaked to the press as well. It's time everyone knew the truth about Lila." As he hangs up, James reflects on his next steps. He has arranged a meeting under the guise of discussing their separation agreement, but his real plan is far more sinister. He intends to expose Lila not only legally but publicly, ensuring her personal and professional life are irrevocably tarnished. The clock strikes the hour, and Lila arrives, her posture tense, her eyes wary. She hesitates at the doorway, taking in James's cold, calculating demeanor. "James, can we just get this over with?" Lila's voice is weary, resigned. James nods, motioning to the seat across from him. "Please, sit. I think you'll find this meeting quite enlightening." Lila sits, clutching her purse like a lifeline. James begins, his voice steady and cruel. Before we discuss the divorce, there's something you need to see. He turns his laptop around to face her and presses play. The screen lights up with images and videos of Lila's indiscretions, including timestamps and explicit messages exchanged with her lover. The evidence is overwhelming, and Lila gasps, her face draining of color. Where did you get this? Lila stammers, her eyes wide with shock. I've known about your betrayal longer than you might think, James says, his voice laced with venom. And I wanted to make sure I had enough to bury you. Lila recoils, tears streaming down her face. James, please, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you like this. Sorry. You're only sorry because you got caught. James stands abruptly, towering over her. You're about to lose everything, Lila. I've sent everything to your family, your friends, and your colleagues. By tomorrow, your little escapades will be public knowledge. Lila shakes her head, sobbing. You can't do this. Please, I'll do anything. It's too late for deals, James sneers. I want you out of my life, for good. He hands her an envelope. Here are the divorce papers. I expect them signed by tomorrow, or the next step is a lawsuit for adultery and defamation. And trust me, I have enough to make it stick. Defeated and broken, Lila takes the envelope and stands, her whole body trembling. You'll regret this, James. Maybe not today, but someday. Hatred doesn't just hurt the hated. With that, she turns and leaves, her steps faltering as she exits the room. James watches her go, the satisfaction he expected feeling more like ash in his mouth. As the door closes behind her, James collapses back into his chair, his victory hollow and unsatisfying. He had imagined this moment would bring him peace, but instead, he feels a deeper chasm opening within him. The room is silent now, save for the ticking of the clock and the distant noise of the city outside. James sits alone, the weight of his actions settling around him like a shroud. He realizes then that in his quest for revenge, he lost a part of himself too. The bitterness of betrayal, once directed at Lila, now seems to seep into his own heart, leaving him to ponder the true cost of his vengeance.